Welcome to my 2023 photographic year in review. And I will be taking you through a bunch of places that I went this year, some with clients, some on my own. It's been a really great year. I think that things finally started to bounce back for us photographers after the last couple of years of travel craziness with COVID. It's still out there, but fortunately, we're vaccinated and such. So, what did I do this past year? Uh, Lots of travel, 9 different U.S. states, 5 different countries, plus 6 if you count the USA. I did all kinds of different kinds of photography, so multiple genres, landscapes, wildlife, travel and architecture, really cool stuff. Um, I got a new camera system. I'll talk a little bit about that. Some of you guys know about that already. And then there's just also, just to throw in there, there's been a lot of advances in the imaging software, which go hand in hand with some of these other systems. It's really made for some amazing progress for different kinds of photography. So what I want to do really is mostly show an overview and photos from where I went with some information, a little background about the locations and the pictures. So sit back, enjoy. I'm going to share some photos that I've gotten over the last almost 12 months now. And we'll start with my winter and spring wildlife trips, some of which I'm going to be doing again in 2024. And we'll start off with my annual trip to California in January. And that's to do bird photography down in the San Diego and La Jolla region. And it's a great place for bird photography, and it's a great place to practice bird photography. The reasons why I like it are its reliability, but mostly, more importantly, it's the interesting settings for these birds. Instead of just taking pictures of pelicans flying with a blank blue sky, you look down at them. You get shots of the birds flying over the sea lion colony with waves breaking over them. So all of these were shot with my Z9 Nikon and 100 to 400 millimeter lens that I was using. Here's a royal tern. Again, the sea lions in the background. It makes for some really unique settings along with that wonderful blue Pacific Ocean. Here's a Brandt's cormorant. Again, we're looking kind of downward towards as it comes in to fly. So you've got the turquoise waves as a background, which is a unique setting compared to other places that you might go where you would just have a blank sky. And then we take a little side trip inland. We go to a place called Santee Lakes, and it's a little bit inland. It's man-made lakes, but it's full of these American coots and wood ducks, cinnamon teals, white pelicans, and the coots, they like to fight with each other. They get kind of territorial. We feed them and they come running across the water. And so that makes it's very challenging. It takes a lot, but I will say that having cameras with bird or animal subject detection is a complete game changer for this kind of photography. And it's a huge improvement from a few years ago when I was just using a Z6 or Z7 camera or even my D850. The advances in autofocus and mirrorless cameras have been just tremendous. The sea lions present a nice subject in La Jolla as well. And then the tricky shot, which is that coot running across the water, come running in because we toss them cracked corn kernels. But there's also other subjects for waterfowl. So if you get down low, you can get cool reflections in the early morning light. And I'm looking forward to going back here in just a couple of weeks to take another group down to this area. And then in April, I went down to Florida to a location that I had not been to previously for a workshop. And this was down in the Palm Beach, Boynton Beach area. It's Wakota-Hatchie wetlands, Green Cay wetlands, and some other areas. And this is what it's like. This is just sort of an overview shot. You can see it's got a huge roosting area. These are wood storks, and they're all over the place that time of the year, nesting. You've got birds coming in, displaying, breeding plumage. We have our green heron here, got nice and close up. Again, this is with my Nikon Z9, 100 to 400 millimeter zoom lens. And sometimes I used the teleconverter, sometimes I did not. And in addition to the birds, when you go there a couple of days, and that's kind of the point, rather than having just one outing, you find other things like anoles, cool lizards. And then we get some other environmental shots, including to go with the close-ups. I really like going out at sunrise. So here's a wood stork in the distance, out at sunrise. You get this beautiful environmental shot. Here's one with a grackle, same thing, calling. Very nice silhouette shots with that early morning sun. And then flight shots, of course, too. We've got our, uh, this is a tricolored heron. We got that little one flying along, and it's looking good in its breeding plumage. So this is an opportunity again to practice settings, to get fairly close. You don't need a monster lens to be out there, and it's a very reliable setting for bird photography, which is more than I can say for some other places where in the last few years it's gotten less reliable in my old locations like Merritt Island or the Vieira wetlands and some of those other places where have just been hammered hard by environmental encroachment from development, hurricanes, drought. It's just been tough. This location is pretty much as can't miss as I can find these days if you're going down to Florida. And I will be going back there in April of this coming year. And then I did a big international trip once more to go to Panama. We started off in Panama City, and sounds exotic, but Panama is really easy to get to. They take the U.S. dollar, and it's beautiful. This is the Pacific side. It's in Panama City, right near the entrance to the Panama Canal. So this is the channel that goes, if you go up to the right, you would end up in the Panama Canal. And I took my clients to the Panama Canal, and we're going to do that again next year. These are the locks, and we can go there, and if you're lucky, ship might come through the locks, but you can see the difference in height between the water on the right side and the water on the left side. So it's just kind of cool to do a little bit of sightseeing in Panama City. Before we fly out, we take a little side trip on the Panama Canal itself, where there are all kinds of monkeys. And here's a little monkey called a titi monkey. I just like how it's sticking its tongue out. Again, this was my Nikon Z9 100 to 400 millimeter lens. A little juvenile capuchin monkey as well. And these were coming up, literally jumping onto our boat. I kid you not. It was, at one point I had to switch to my iPhone to take these photos. But from Panama City, we take a very short 45-minute flight up to the northeast corner of Panama, which is about 10 miles from Costa Rica. So if you're familiar with the kind of animals you might come across in Costa Rica, we're going to see the same animals here, only we're on a private island wildlife sanctuary eco lodge. So most of the island is dedicated as a wildlife refuge, and we're on private property that adjoins and is adjacent to that wildlife refuge. And you'll see the tropical birds, like this honey creeper. We take a little boat ride out one day on a canal. This is a snail kite, and as you can see, it has got the snail. I shot this from a moving boat. Again, having that subject detection for birds is absolutely incredible. It's really, really good. We also come across a diversity of wildlife. We find these are the strawberry poison dart frogs, and I used a more close-up rig and a flash to take this. So this was not with the 100 to 400. It was with a shorter lens. But there's raccoons. This was in the wild. I shot this from the deck on the second story of our eco lodge where we stayed, the main building. It was just out there. But the star of the show when we go to Panama is the sloths. They are the reason I love going here. This is a two-toed sloth, and it was just in a tree at ground level, and we were able to get about 10 feet away from it without disturbing it. Absolutely incredible. The sloths on this island do not face predation from harpy eagles like the sloths on the mainland do. So mainland Panama, Costa Rica, if you come across a sloth, you're more likely to see it way up in a tree and it's just hunkered down. On this island, we see them in broad daylight, actively eating and carrying their babies even. So here's the baby three-toed sloth. And I was probably 15 feet away from this. I just kept my distance for obvious reasons. So there was some tremendous opportunities in my 2023 shooting for some wonderful wildlife photography. Now, shifting gears, I also spent 2023 getting more back into infrared photography. And I led two workshops, or co-led one and led another workshop, along with some online stuff. But I partnered up with my Image Doctors co-host, Rick Walker, and we took a small group to do in-depth infrared class in Tucson, Arizona. So most of the time we did classroom stuff, learning about post-processing, but we also did photo walks in the Tucson area. And we came away with shots like this from downtown Tucson. These are the agaves there. Going to the old one of the missions. So this is infrared converted to black and white. Cactus. We went to a park, national park or National Forest Service land, and they had some wonderful cactus where we could play around. In addition to the black and white photography, I recently converted to a full spectrum infrared camera, which allows me to use different filters. And one of the filters is called the IR chrome filter, which makes foliage turn red. It's pretty wild. So I'm able to shoot not only traditional 720 nanometer, what some people call standard infrared, but also color infrared, where you get a little bit of color in those images, and then things in between. And with a full spectrum infrared camera, you can also get a infrared blocking filter and use it as a visible light camera as well. So you could have one camera that you could use to do both color and a variety of infrared photos. And I'm looking forward to getting into some more. I'm looking into some more locations to change it up for next year to teach more infrared, if that's something that you're interested in. My other infrared workshop took me back to one place I've been going to for the last 12 years, and that's South Dakota and the Badlands. But this time we did it from a purely infrared approach, which is interesting because we could shoot more in the middle of the day. We didn't have to get up at 4 a.m. to go out for sunrise, which can be kind of painful if you think about it. So here's your typical scene in the South Dakota Badlands with the rock formations. You can see a little bit of foliage there. This was done with some color infrared. You get a little bit of the blue in the foliage and the grass that's there. But we went to some alternative locations as well in the areas surrounding the Badlands. So we got some interesting shots. So here's one from this little town called Cottonwood, which was a cool place to explore. It had old buildings, old cars, that kind of thing. I switched it up. Again, here's that IR chrome filter, which gives you that aerochrome style look, the red foliage, the blue skies, pretty cool looking, pretty wild. Again, this was all green in real life. So this is just very surreal kinds of photos. And there's our obligatory rusty truck in a field. This is most likely probably 720 nanometer infrared standard IR converted to monochrome, as is this one. This was a little place out about an hour's drive from where we stayed. And there was an old town full of buildings from the 1800s. And this was one of those buildings, the church out there. And thought we had really cool clouds. And it was a very fun workshop where we really just focused on taking infrared pictures the entire time. It was a really different way of seeing our subjects that we've maybe photographed before, just in regular color. So this workshop happened in June. And at the end of April of last year, I decided to take a chance and explore a camera system that I've been recommending for the last 3 years, but I just didn't have any real reason to buy on my own. But I thought I would try it out. And I purchased an OM system kit, OM1 camera, and several lenses, a couple of zoom lenses. And I deliberately went with things f4 lenses for this kit because they're smaller. There's faster lenses, but I wanted something that would be small, that would be lightweight and easy to travel with, because I do a lot of travel photography these days. It's become a more important part of my workshop scene. And the Micro Four Thirds format, if you haven't paid attention to it, it's a 2x crop from 35 millimeter. But the OM1 offers, I would say, almost as many features, very similar to what I had in the Nikon Z8 and Z9, but it's just a teeny bit smaller than the Nikon Z7 II that I used to use for travel. So it's got a nice little grip on it. What you see in this picture is my entire kit for when I went to Alaska. I had what I'm holding is a 12 to 100 lens on the OM1, which is a 24 to 200 equivalent f4. And then in my shoulder bag is a 100 to 400, which gave me the equivalent of a 200 to 800. So I had two lenses for one trip, and I had 24 to 800 millimeters covered in a kit that only weighed about, in total, maybe about 5 pounds. So my wildlife kit went from a almost 7 pound Nikon kit to under 4 pounds, and I get the same reach. I get up to 800 millimeters. My travel kit went from something in the range of almost 5 pounds with a Z8 24 to 120 to under 3 pounds. In fact, when I traveled later in the year, I took four lenses and I was only at 3.5 pounds. This is very nice. So after 8 months of using the OM system camera and lenses, I've concluded that the only major thing I'm giving up, and it's not major to me, is the extra resolution. I'm shooting 20 megapixels instead of 45. I don't print large, but I've made 16 by 20 prints from the OM1 that look absolutely wonderful, so it's not a big deal. But I'm able to pack my gear for traveling, especially on aircraft, much more efficiently. I can put things under the seat that would have required an overhead bin in the past. And for indoor handheld photography, and I'll show you some photos later of places like indoor churches, cathedrals, and street photography, the OM system kit, it really had some distinct advantages due to its stabilizing system, the IBIS, in-body image stabilization. I'm able to hold the OM1 at ridiculously slow shutter speeds, and that allows me to use fairly low ISOs, even indoors with an f4 lens. So that's kind of crazy. And, if you didn't come to my Micro Four Thirds webinar, it's posted on my YouTube page. You can watch it out there as where I go through some of the advantages and disadvantages of the system. But for me, it's been a wonderful system to use. It's pleasant to shoot with. And I really, and my back especially, really appreciates the lighter load. So from this point on, all of the pictures I'm going to share came from my OM system Olympus lens kit, Micro Four Thirds kit. I'm going to show you all these remaining pictures. And they start with some adventures I had in the wild, starting in Colorado. And in Colorado, I did some individual independent shooting as well as a photo safari. So I took a trip with Rick Walker, and we went up to what used to be called Mount Evans. It's now called Mount Blue Sky for reasons. And we went and we had the 100 to 400 Olympus lens. I had a 300 millimeter Olympus lens. They were just wonderful. So here's one of the yellow-bellied marmots that's up there. And we also saw the mountain goats. And having the range of a single lens that goes from 200 to 800 framing equivalent is really nice, because it gives you a lot of flexibility with the way you want to shoot without having to move around too much, especially when you're up at 14,000 feet of elevation almost, and it can be hard to walk around and not lose your breath. Here's one with the 300 millimeter Olympus lens. It's an f4. It was ridiculously sharp, so sharp that I had to reduce my sharpening amount settings in Lightroom. That's how crazy it was. And then later on in the year, I went with Rick again, and we went and took a group on a photo safari to Rocky Mountain National Park and the surrounding areas. So again, these are all with the OM1 camera. This was with my 12 to 100 millimeter lens. This is Bear Lake at sunrise. Here is I forget which mountain this was. It's not Mount Evans. This is oh, my brain just melted on me which mountain this was. Long's Peak. Thank you very much, brain. This is Long's Peak. This is just outside Rocky Mountain National Park. We had the alpenglow right before the sun was over the horizon. We also went down to some streams. We did some long exposure shooting on a stream on an otherwise overcast day. And I was able to use my camera without any neutral density filters. I just had a polarizer, and I took advantage of some of the computational functions in the OM camera to get longer exposures, 2, 3, 4 seconds long, couple seconds long. We also did wildlife. So back to that 100 to 400. Here's a bull elk bugling in Rocky Mountain National Park. Again, OM1 camera, 100 to 400. So it was very flexible kit. We did some road trips. We had a real interesting time getting around. We had some crazy weather, and we barely avoided a government closure of the national park, so we lucked out there. And this is a little church that's again outside of the park itself. In August, I took a group to Alaska, and we did it on land and sea. We actually met in Seattle, flew to Anchorage, took the train up to Denali. So here's a shot from the train going out towards Denali National Park. And then we took a trip into Denali on a little bus that you do. And we saw some wildlife. So grizzly bear, this again with my OM1, 100 to 400, cropped in a little bit. I use some of the new software tools that are out there like Photo AI to clean up my high ISO images, also to enlarge a little bit when I cropped in. Worked great. Here's a shot of a willow ptarmigan, and I want to say this one was up around ISO 10,000 or higher. I cleaned it up without any issue using a DxO program called Pure Raw 3. Really great. And then from Denali, we took the bus down to Whittier, and we got on a cruise ship. We were on a Holland America cruise. It was great, really wonderful. You unpack, you get to see a lot of things. And there's, in my opinion, no better way to see the southern part of Alaska along the peninsula than on a cruise, because there's no roads. You can't get anywhere. So this is an 18,000 foot peak. And I shot it from the deck of the cruise ship just when we were out sailing. We went to the Whittier Glacier, and then we went to Glacier Bay. I had a little fun. This is looking down at the balcony of my stateroom. I was looking down at the lifeboat there, but I did that handheld long exposure thing again without any neutral density filter to get a second or two exposure, just bracing myself on the rail so you get the blurred ocean down there in the background. But we saw the glaciers from the ship. Having that extra reach, having a telephoto lens really helped here. So this was with the 100 to 400. And then we were in Glacier Bay. You can see that smaller ship there for scale of some of the glaciers there, sea ice. And from Glacier Bay, we went to a few ports of call, including Skagway, Juneau, and Ketchikan. And so we would do photo walks in there looking for things like reflections. We took the White Pass and Yukon rail route up to the White Pass summit that is actually in Canada. And here was a shot from the train as we were about to enter a tunnel over an old trestle bridge, which is quite cool. And that was a very fun little side trip that we did. And then in Juneau, we went out to see the Mendenhall Glacier. Here's a handheld long exposure shot of the waterfall out there. We took a whale watching trip, saw humpback whales out there feeding. They were all over. And then when we were down in Ketchikan, we did some walks around, and the creek runs right through town, and the salmon were swimming upstream. And I was able to use some burst captures to capture this shot of the salmon going upstream. So that was my late summer, early fall. And then the rest of the year, I focused more on travel photography. I'm going to talk about two trips that I took, one with myself, and one with clients. The first one I went on was to go on a cruise to New England and Canada. This was a cruise from New York City round trip, and it went up to places like Boston, and then up to Halifax, Nova Scotia, and back to New York City. And it was on Princess Cruise Lines, and we had a great time on this trip. So I had a few days on the front end in New York City, and here's just a shot of the Oculus. Now you'll notice the people are a little bit blurred. I love this idea where I didn't want the people to be a distraction, but they're there, and you can't avoid having people in those photos. And if you've ever seen those photos, I was kind of inspired by like the old photos of Grand Central Station, which were by default long exposures, and the people were just ghostly blurs. Well, I didn't have a tripod with me. I didn't bring that. But this is about a half-second exposure, handheld, with my OM1 camera, and it worked out. And I just went with the black and white treatment. After a few days in New York City, we got on board our cruise ship. This was just a shot from one of the lounges. It was very nice. It's really great to be able to travel and come back and not have to worry about figuring out where you're going to eat every day. And our first stop was Providence, or no, excuse me, Newport, Rhode Island. And we took a little harbor cruise, did a little sightseeing. And this ship had so much character. This was actually a ship that is still certified, believe it or not, by the Coast Guard. Don't ask me how it remains seaworthy. It was a total rust bucket. But this is a ship that goes out and catches bait that the lobster fishermen use to put in their traps. And I just thought, so I shot this from another boat. I was moving on a boat as I took this photograph. And then this was shot from the deck of our ship. This is one of the lighthouses as we were leaving the Newport Harbor area, one of the lighthouses there. We went up to Boston. This is one of the cemeteries in Boston. So there's a lot of American history there. And Boston is one of those places where you can actually find buildings and monuments from the 1600s rather than the 1800s like we have out west. And so it's a very cool city to visit, and it's so walkable. You just walk around and you can see so much history. From there, we went up and we saw the Bay of Fundy. We drove around. The fall colors were a little bit past their peak at this point, but this is the Bay of Fundy, very pretty part of Canada. And then saw a waterfall up there too. This was also handheld. I braced myself up against a railing and just shot this handheld. I did not bring a tripod on the trip. And then in Halifax, of course, we went to Peggy's Cove, which is kind of overrun by tourists, but it was fun to see. And I bring this up because I am planning a fall 2025 cruise on the same itinerary where we'll go up to Canada from New York City, and it's going to be in 2025. I haven't released it yet. It's not open yet, but it will be coming soon. I have some logistical things to work through, making sure we can get guide to take us on photo excursions. My last and biggest trip of the year was the Christmas markets in Prague, Vienna, and then a river cruise on the Danube. We started and I met my clients in Prague, and it had snowed. It was cold, but it was absolutely magical. I have never felt more like stepping into a fairy tale than going to the Christmas market in Prague. The blue hour there was just absolutely magical, and it was incredible to see. We also went out to the famous Charles Bridge. This one is a statue of St. John the Baptist. It's one of many statues on the Charles Bridge. You can see the cathedral and Prague Castle there in the background. And just for fun, this was shot handheld at Blue Hour. I recorded my EXIF data. I wrote it down. This is a quarter second f4 ISO 500 handheld with my OM1 camera. I really think it did a great job here. It also, as I mentioned, was great indoors. This is the cathedral at Prague Castle, St. Vitus Cathedral. This is a tenth of a second at f5 ISO 200. So I didn't even have to crank the ISO to get this. And with the micro four thirds camera I was using, it was the equivalent of shooting at f10 on a full frame camera. So I have a lot of depth of field here, which was nice. Here's a 2-second exposure that I did handheld. I leaned up against the post to get moving traffic lights. This is also in Prague. And then from Prague, we went to Vienna. and we went to the Christmas market in Vienna. This is the Vienna City Hall with the huge Christmas market in front of it, which was cool. And then we boarded our riverboat. This was our ship. They're in the foreground, the Avalon Envision, and this is when we were docked in Vienna before we set up along the Danube. I did bring a tripod on this trip though. And here's the one shot that I made with my tripod. It was from an overpass, and I noticed that the traffic was moving. I love this church. It's not the oldest church. It was built in, I think, 1909 or something like that. It's the St. Francis de Assisi Church in Vienna. This is a composite of two 15-second exposures, and I blended them together in Photoshop to get multiple traffic. Otherwise, you'd see the cars would be crashing into each other. That's not what was going on there. This is two shots together. But this was the only time I really used the tripod, was for shots where I knew I wanted to do really long exposures, 4, 5, 10 seconds or more. We continued up the Danube, and we stopped along the way at a variety of cities, some in the daytime, some in the evening. This is a rainbow over the town of Regensburg in Germany. And this is their cathedral. Little detail there. I was using a 40 to 150 f4 zoom, which is very small, and is the equivalent of an 80 to 300 in full frame equivalent. Here's the Christmas market in Passau in Germany as well, right on the Austrian border. The cathedral was lit up. We were there at Blue Hour. Again, a most magical time for shooting. It doesn't matter what the weather is like. We had a lot of gloomy, overcast, even some rain. But the Blue Hour, it just comes out and makes things really great for shooting. Another one of those, here's another one of those long exposures. This is probably about half a second or so, maybe even a little longer, 1 second, handheld on the streets in Passau, blurring the folks I didn't want the people to be the main subject here. I wanted it to be the architecture. We stopped in the town of Melk in Austria. This is the Melk Abbey. It's the most ornate, over-the-top Baroque architecture. I mean, Baroque architecture is kind of known for its being a little bit excessive anyway. This was even more so. And here's the view of the town looking out at Melk from the top of the abbey there. Some of the streets. Again, it was Christmas time, so I tried to capture images that were indicative of that time of the year with the decorations. And we finished in Nuremberg, Germany. This is a shot from the Christmas market there. And this is what the Christmas market in Nuremberg looks like. So that's a fast breeze through a lot of photos. I think I captured something on the order of 17,000 images this year, obviously not all of which are keepers, and I'll be getting rid of many of them, but that was more than double the number of images that I captured last year. So it shows you just, how busy things have been in 23, and I'm looking forward to continuing that trend, I hope, next year. And what did I learn this year? Bunch of things. New software that's out there, it makes high ISO shooting, whether it's with your full frame camera or APS-C camera or micro four thirds camera, it's almost a non-issue these days. Between DxO's Pure Raw 3 and sharpening with Topaz Photo AI, it's just amazing what you can do. You can shoot at these ridiculously high ISOs and just recover things. And if your shot's a little bit soft, maybe due to some camera shake or whatever, you can sharpen them back up again in some cases in miraculous ways. On my infrared kit, converting it to full spectrum was great because I just have so much more creative freedom now with these different filters to shoot a variety of infrared between color and black and white, and it's wonderful. As you might be able to tell, I really do enjoy my smaller kit. It's not the best kit for everybody, but it's really great for what I'm trying to do. So for wildlife photography and for travel photography, it has been a joy using the smaller kit. There's not too many compromises that I make with it. um, at least, not compromises that I worry about. And it's really almost eliminated my need to use a travel tripod at all. I did so much shooting handheld, even at twilight, that other than really long exposures, a tripod just wasn't needed. I also learned that river cruising is a really wonderful way of getting around Europe. It's a fantastic experience. So, what about how does this relate to next year? Well, I got a bunch of trips on the docket for next year, some of which I have space for. So I will be going back to San Diego in just a few weeks. That trip is full, but I do have spaces to join me to go to those locations in South Florida, April 14th through 18th, and I'm I'm dedicating that to people with Nikon cameras and Olympus OM system cameras, simply because those are the systems that I know and can teach best. I've got a really unique opportunity. I know that's a redundancy. I've got a super cool opportunity. I've been asked to be a co-instructor, co-leader on a workshop or photo safari, actually, in the Faroe Islands with a colleague of mine, Matt Sooth. Matt's an Olympus, I should say, OM system ambassador. And that's August 7th through 15th. It's going to be landscape photography, puffin photography, a week of just intense, amazing scenery. Think Iceland, but without as many people, without the crowd. I'm leading a private tour on land to Ireland in September, and I do have one room for two photographers or a photographer plus a companion sharing a room, September 2nd through 11th. And then I've got at least one spot open for my wildlife tour of Panama. So we'll start in Panama City and go back out and see the sloths again, and that's in October. And as I mentioned, my fall New England cruise, which will be for 2025 at the end of September. I'll have more info on that as well. Now, I will be putting out probably some more things. I'm looking into doing some infrared workshops, and of course my online training and classes.